We got a mailbag question, kind of
Already?
about this
Hurts
topic.
already,
I gotta
man.
shut off my phone because that's gonna go off in a bit, I think.
Yeah, you got a lot of friends calling you.
A mailbag question here: how to deal with a critical spouse? They do not think they are being critical. They are type A and have workaholic tendencies and expect everyone else to be the same. It's exhausting and discouraging to never feel like I'm doing enough.
Is that Nicole?
No.
I think that's Nicole saying
It's
that.
more likely from my wife.
No, I think, okay.
It's
I don't know.
That's my marriage struggle.
It's not mine.
No?
No, and you know something?
He's the opposite of a workaholic.
The last time that we talked about marriages, I heard what you said, by the way. The last time we talked about marriages, I went back and listened to it with my wife. Honestly, my wife and I are a brilliant team. I love her with all my heart, and I wanted to say it. So I can't speak to this stuff like how do you deal with a critical wife?
What do you mean? If someone in your church comes to you and
A critical wife was the question.
No.
right? A
critical
spouse.
spouse.
Man.
Spouse,
It goes
yeah.
Both. It could be either. Easily.
Either one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Look, so in my case, it would be a wife.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
Obviously.
I hope so. Well,
Anyway, my wife's not critical.
okay, but how would you mentor someone in your church if they came to you with this problem?
Oh, okay, never mind. I totally, my mind didn't grab it like that.
Yeah, you have to listen to the question.
You answer first. How would you deal with it?
Well, I am that person.
You're the critical one?
I am the critical person.
Of yourself or of your wife?
No, of anybody I'm in a relationship with.
Oh,
Which means also himself.
Yeah, which means also myself.
that's not good.
Do more, try harder. We can do better. Together we can do this, right?
Mm.
I often don't allow my wife to struggle with things or don't want her to struggle with things simply because I feel like, no, like we should just be able to push through this. We're a team. We can handle this, with the Lord's help. We'll just, I always feel like, yeah, the idea of like just being, I don't want to say weak because that would be too simple of a word, but just the idea of like, hey, you're struggling and I don't know, like I have very little.
Are you for real?
I'm dead serious.
You got 6 kids at home.
Yeah.
Or 7.
Yeah,
What is
well,
it,
we
6 or
could have
7?
more. So thankfully
6,
we only
7,
have 6.
Which is it?
We could have 8 or 9. Like the number of kids you have is irrelevant. Whatever, that comment.
Yeah.
Everybody always says that. And it's really dismissive to people that have 2 kids or a mom or even 1.
No, I'm not being
I know
dismissive of the
you're
other
not.
person.
I know you're
I'm saying
not.
cut your wife some slack.
I know.
She's doing all this stuff at home with so many kids.
Yeah, she's doing an amazing job.
How should Marie deal with you that would actually help in changing,
She literally
moving the needle?
She literally shares her heart. So this person, and there again, like some people don't have the whole premise of this conversation makes me think. I've been on a real rant the last few weeks with a lot of people. I think we shared it maybe the last podcast. But just with people, we had a big debate about this on our last podcast about how hard marriage is. And it's not hard for Matt Keane, but most people, marriage is extremely difficult. And it's not talked about enough, and it really bothers me. And I think when you deal with young people that are in the throes of like deciding if they're going to get married or even date, most of them have had 80 to 90% of their like infiltration of their mind of kind of what to expect in a romantic relationship from non-Christians through social media and through movies and television, right?
There was you put up the podcast twice. You deleted the first one, and then because you wanted more of the recording at the end.
Minutes, yeah.
But there was a comment. Some woman, I think it was, said that there's an unreal expectation, often coming from men. I might butcher what she said, but it was something along the lines of, in young, maybe her topic was isolated to Christian marriages. I don't know, but she was saying that there's an unrealistic expectation coming from men that a wife needs to be like perfect in every way, and even in the bedroom, they need to be, the wife needs to have the ability to fulfill every fantasy, and then, has to be able to keep a home and raise kids. So I guess it's something that I've never really thought about before, but I think that if we come into a relationship, any relationship really, but especially a marriage with that kind of expectation, which is just totally unreal, right? It's not possible for someone to meet every single ideal at every level. Then your marriage is going to be, how can it succeed? If that's your standard all the
You're
time for
setting
every
yourself
person.
up for a lot of conflict and a lot of disappointment.
I mean,
Why?
that
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
me. Yeah. Yeah,
that podcast with Dr. Hawkins shows that. I mean, there's like over almost 2,000 comments now, over 40,000 views, and it's mostly women, and it's like saying the same thing over and over and over about guys that just aren't taking responsibility and just expect to be served,
Yeah.
and aren't really emotionally there.
Where does that come from?
Well, there's not good modeling. There's no good dads. There's very few good dads.
Because I haven't watched that one yet, by the way. Like,
Okay, that's fine.
it's a commitment. It looks like a commitment.
It is a commitment.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of that. I think I think a lot of the guys are just completely blind to how they're showing up, and they just don't get it. And actually, Dr. Hawkins actually says that they just are blind to how they're showing up. But I would say like simple things like marriage meetings are super powerful, especially consistently over time, to start talking about how the other person's actually showing up. Pray a ton for your spouse.
Yeah.
That gets massively underestimated.
But that's isolated to a Christian community.
Yeah, but still, even in that, a lot of people in the Christian community don't do that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, totally.
Like, get counseling for just yourself and how to deal with it. Like, take care of your own self. Like, one of the most powerful examples that my coach gave me was when you go fly somewhere, they tell you when the masks come down to always put on your own mask before your kid's mask.
Mm-hmm.
And they of course say that because otherwise you're going to be passed out when you're trying to put on your kid's mask and not be able to do that. And it's an example of self-care. You got to take care of yourself first before you can take care of others. And so for this, if you're dealing with a critical spouse, like, just make sure you're doing good self-care, like take care of your own emotional health in other ways so you can actually not be so exhausted and discouraged when you feel like you're never being enough, because they're not necessarily going to change.
Yeah.
It is interesting too. People, I mean, I think it really does go both ways. There's a lot of women that are hypercritical too and very high achievers, and the husband never feels like he's meeting his wife's expectation of what he needs to be as a husband. It definitely is a two-way street.
Agreed.
So I could see that would be pretty disappointing, but I mean, it really comes down to where is even your relationship in general at, and can you share frankly about how you feel? And most marriages are not even at that level. Most marriages, the people that I deal with, there's little pieces of things. You know, I've had experiences in the last few days where they can't share bits and pieces. Well, you're definitely not, and it's hard even for me. It's like, and often I think, hey, maybe the Christ-like thing to do, the proper Christian thing to do, is just to shut your mouth and man up and just, do the right thing and live with the little frustrations and discontent. And to some degree, you are supposed to do that. And most people don't do that enough. Most men in particular can't just bite their tongue and just shut up and do the right thing and care well. Yeah. My experience has been that people quickly voice their discontentment. And it's like,
really? But probably not in a healthy way.
Well, it's really difficult to in a healthy way. If you do it in the moment, my belief is if you do it in the moment,
you'll hurt somebody.
There will be carnage.
Yeah.
A gift, and like Kyle mentioned it, the marriage meeting is a gift, because if you, like for me, I have lists for everything. My whole life is compartmentalized on Microsoft to do on the app, right? And it's like,
do better, number one.
Try harder, but put it on a list and if you bring something up after you have thought about it for even 5 minutes, but let alone 3 days. First of all, 80% of things you won't bring up, because you'll realize that you are a petty baby and you just need to grow up and get over yourself. And then the things that are still nagging at you, it's like, hey, you've had time to process it. And you need to realize that the other person hasn't had any time to process it yet. That's the other problem when people bring things up. They very quickly, in a point where it's like when you attacked me and said, hey, you always call me a heretic, right? And I have to forgive you for calling you bad names.
Well, you're obligated to, right?
I hadn't had a chance to think about it. I mean, I was just flippantly calling you names because
so on my side it meant something, on your side it didn't, and we had to.
And we sorted it out pretty quick because my heart,
and because we're men.
No, because I'm I had no intention of hurting your feelings, and I didn't realize you were a baby, right? So it's like, well,
I mean, a lot of people are also super conflict avoidant, and I would put myself in that camp. But I'm trying to work out of it. I noticed that this week I wrote a journal, so my coach could read it. And as I was writing the journal, I was like, oh, I actually want to share this with Nicole, but I felt resistance towards it because I wasn't sure how she was going to take it and not be happy. Anyway, I left, and she went on my laptop and she seen the journal was still open, so she read the whole thing.
Did you do that on purpose? Did you leave it open on purpose?
No, I definitely did not.
I think
so,
I think subconsciously you did that on purpose.
definitely did not. And so we had a chat about it later. And initially I was just like kind of annoyed that she would read it. But then I thought later, I was like, no, this is actually a good thing because now we had to talk about it, and it was good. So I was kind of forced into it. But well, yeah, we're naturally, a lot of people are very, very conflict avoidant and won't have conversations. It's why most people don't get coaching. They're like they don't want to be challenged. They're scared of what might show up.
As a minister, in the church, a minister of the gospel, I'd say one of the biggest things we find or when I say we, my wife and I, when we talk to married couples, is poor communication. So their intent might be good, but they're just they're awful at communicating how they're feeling on the inside, especially toward their spouse. And I got to correct you. You said, "Oh, marriage is easy for Matt Keane." No, it's not easy, but it's always been rewarding. Like even in we have our.
I did feel like last time when I talked about the angst of marriage, you were pushing back and acting like
because I felt it was kind of like we were
too negative.
Well, no, not too negative, but I there wasn't much honesty about the positive part of it all, right? Like marriage is worth it.
Gary's a Debbie Downer. If it's the real estate market or marriage or anything else.
No, but I still think it's amazing. I still think it's amazing to own real estate, and I still think it's amazing to be married. I just feel like most people spend way too much time regretting getting married after rather than being worried about the path ahead.
Okay, I can't say that. You think most people regret marriage?
They don't, but they don't realize...
Why is divorce rate at 50%?
Well, that's not most. That's half.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people that are in marriages that wish they weren't in marriages, and they're still married even. That's not even including the people that are barely hanging on.
Okay, fair enough.
It's awful.
Especially in Christian circles, because they're not allowed to getting divorced, so they stay together, but they're actually divorced in their own home.
When you go back into
is that more of a thing in like
Oh, talk about conflict avoidance.
What's your background again? What kind of people are listening to this? Steer away from the terminology.
That's not where I wanted to go.
But they're not all the listeners are those people, right? We do have a broad listener base.
Sure. But yeah, I would say yes, because I remember my coach challenging me super hard and being like, why don't you get divorced? Why don't you get divorced? I'm like, that's not an option. She's like, well, you're acting outside the marriage. Why is that an option then? Like, get divorced.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so,
beeping at us.
That is super strong.
Are we losing battery or technology?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Sorry.
One thing, when I went to the first marriage conference I went to, it was 3 days, and it was in Alberta, and it was me, Nicole, and 3 other couples, and 2 counselors for 3 full days at some remote house. And they taught us something called the heart talk, which me and Nicole still use once in a while, and it's kind of cumbersome, but it goes in that she goes, hey, we want to have a heart talk, or I can say it, and then she shares what's on her heart, and the only thing I can say back is what I'm hearing you say is. And I have to repeat it back. Yeah. And then she can clarify if that's what she meant or not. And I say, is there more? And she can keep going like indefinitely until she goes, no, there's more. And then I say, can I be the speaker now?
Indefinitely?
Yeah, it's freedom sessions. This is called bilging in freedom sessions. We literally have a session
it's
where
very similar.
An authentic level.
I wouldn't want my wife to go on indefinitely.
Very similar.
That's a long time.
The only one that would go on indefinitely is you, so you're good.
So then it switches. So I can be the speaker now. And then she has to repeat back to me what I'm saying. And it actually has been massively helpful. And we actually used it this week still. As soon as things get tense, I'm like, I need to make sure that she feels heard. And she actually does then when I repeat it back. Because usually we respond right away with how we feel. Yeah. Or you'd be like, Matt, and you hear the first 3 words. And then you give a response to that. And the last piece you didn't hear.
I roll my eyes for the viewers who... didn't see that.
Hardly listening. But it's been really powerful, and that's just a powerful communication tool. So communication
that's called communication.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying. They just, most people and most couples don't communicate.
Or know how.
Yeah. There's an analogy, I don't know where I read it. I think it came out of a book from the 90s or something, but I don't even know what it was. Something along the lines of communication in the trenches of war is effective because you're only dealing with the facts. You're not dealing with what you feel about those facts. And often we think that the communication in a marriage is going to be like communication in the trenches. But it's not. It's loaded with emotion, right? So you kind of have to be patient with one another and chisel away the emotions around the facts and then deal with what's really going on. So communication in all of our in all the marriage counseling we do, like young married or young couples about to get married, almost all of the stuff where when they finally admit that there's, issues, in their relationship, because in the beginning stages, they just want the glow and the halo around marriage, and everything's so wonderful and beautiful. But as soon as you get them to admit that there are issues, the very next thing you find out quickly is that they don't know how to talk about them.
Yes.
So do you do marriage counseling before you marry people at your church?
Yeah.
How many times do you meet them for marriage
At
counseling?
least 3.
Okay.
So, and by 3, I mean, so that's at least 3 90-minute sessions across around 6 weeks or something.
And do you ever get them
and
to
we
talk
give them
about...
and we give them homework.
Okay. And do you ever get them to talk about what their expectation would be for sex in marriage?
Always.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And what are couples' expectations for sex in marriage?
First of all, they're very reluctant to talk about it. And funny enough, the man is reluctant to talk about it.
Okay.
So the woman will, be willing to, usually, not always, but usually the woman will be willing to talk about, whether or not she's looking forward to intimacy in a marriage or something. But I think it's because it's a given that the man's looking forward to intimacy. Yeah. But the terms of what that looks like, they're very reluctant to let those come out of the box, right? Because first of all, they don't want to talk to 2 pastors about it.
Yeah, but they're probably not talking to each other about it honestly.
They're
either.
definitely not.
So it's a total disaster.
Or the parents are.
We did marriage counseling a couple of years ago with someone. A few years back now, and like when it came up about sex and intimacy and stuff in the bedroom, I mean, we don't want to pry too much because it's it's not our place, it's their private place. But when it came to like whether or not they were expecting more than just like this, I don't want to get too graphic, but so prior to their marriage, they were physically involved with each other, but not to the point of intercourse. Yeah. They didn't go that far. So the discussion that they didn't want to have was, well, what's permitted in the bedroom, right? It was an awkward conversation, but in that conversation, it came out that the man was actually really, really nervous because he wasn't a virgin, but his fiance was, right? So he was extremely nervous because he didn't know how to, he didn't want to equate her to his past partners. And she was thinking like, oh, what is that? Something's beeping.
Pavlov's dog.
Keep talking.
As you were.
Anyway, so it was awkward because they didn't feel like they were already on equal footing sexually. Yeah. She thought, I've never been with someone and he's been with someone. Am I going to be up to his expectation? Yeah. And he was thinking, oh my goodness, I don't want her to feel like she's in competition whenever. So they had never spoken about that. And as soon as it kind of opened up, like they realized, okay, this is an issue.
We need to talk about it.
So they need to talk about it, right? Anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting because
they're still married, doing well.
But especially like if most guys are looking at porn for the first time at 12, or 10, even younger than that, that's where they're getting their ideas of sex from, and that's how they're going into the marriage, and they're getting they have hours and hours of that kind of stuff by the time they're 20 years old or 25 years old and get married. But like 1 or 2 talks from their pastor for 90 minutes, and maybe 1 10-minute talk from their dad, and that's how they're going in, and that really screws things up. That problem is everywhere.
If they've got a dad that will have the conversation.
That's right. Yeah, there's a book called The Great Sex Rescue that Nicole and I are reading together, and it's super helpful. And last year, Matt Keane actually did our pastor did a sermons. Oh, sorry, Matt Shantz did a.
Yeah, I didn't.
Did a sermon series on church hurt, and one of the ways that the church has hurt their members by teaching wrongly about sex. Because a lot of people have this idea that it's like almost get taught that it's wrong until they're married, and now all of a sudden the day they're married they're supposed to flip a switch and they're supposed to like
feel
love it
very sexual,
and feel sexual and be totally cool with it. Well, that doesn't happen either, and so there's a lot of fear going into it, and it just definitely doesn't get talked about.
It's interesting
enough.
Too because you use the terms like you talk about it's like sex and then you talk about intimacy, right? And like I think even for
Very different.
myself, well, very different. And I think that most men just don't understand how much women long, even me, like I've been married literally 15 years and I'm like just trying to figure it out. Right. And it's like, okay, what does your wife need? Well, she really needs intimacy. And that looks very different than when a man hears intimacy, it's often, and now
Just
we're
sex.
stereotyping because the script can be flipped. I don't like stereotypes, but just the idea of, hey, as a general rule, that would be the theme. Where a guy, feels
Just the physical act versus actually.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, like women long for connection, right? And if you look even in our home, like it's very, like our journey has just been like, even now you say 6 kids, right? But it's like a woman who has 6 kids that have a lot of needs, like, how much more can she, do for her husband? It's like, hey, there just needs to be so much dialogue. Like we are learning this, and it's just really cool to kind of be like, hey, once you can share your heart with each other, and there can just be so much grace when you really hear someone else's heart, right? But if it's stuffed and you're internalizing and you're not even able to share,
brutal.
you're in deep trouble.
Nicole used to say to me all the time, like, I don't feel safe. And I'd be like, what do you mean? What does that even talk about? I'm not going to hate you. Like, what's going on? But what she meant was there was no emotional connection.
Right.
And so that's really like,
and it's you're most vulnerable there.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's right. And so to have an emotional connection, but that's like, most guys are like emotions. What are emotions?
Yeah. Anyway.
Gary's like, I'm thinking about the barn.
Yeah. But
Anyways.
before we go on from that.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed that episode and were blessed by it, would you be willing to support the show? That would help a lot in creating more content, improving the quality of the content, putting the production value, getting more guests on, and me being able to spend more time and energy towards it. So if you're interested in doing that, you can click up here and it'll take you to a support page. But you can also subscribe to the podcast by clicking over here and doing that. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.